We begin tonight with a set of big numbers as pump prices get jacked up anew for the 9th straight week. 90 centavos first. That's the additional cost for a liter of gasoline starting tomorrow. Gasoline in the metro alone now sells at 65 to 80 pesos a liter. Next, loading on diesel will cost you an additional 80 centavos per liter. Current rates of diesel can go as high as 60 pesos per liter. Finally, a liter of kerosene will also be more expensive by 75 centavos. A liter of kerosene now costs 69 pesos.
The spike in fuel prices comes at a time when mobility is expected to return to pre-pandemic ways. Metro Manila and several other areas in the country de-escalate to alert level 1 beginning tomorrow. This means public transportation is now at full capacity, and many say this marks the start of the new normal. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay. You're watching The Big Story. Petroleum products are scheduled for another round of massive price rises as already tight oil supplies are expected to be affected even more by worsening global tensions.
An adjustment in fare rates is already on the table as discussions begin. But pending that, a conditional cash aid for drivers is now being rushed. Gerard De La Peña with The Big Story.
For the 9th week in a row, local fuel prices are set to increase yet again on Tuesday. The Energy Department said supply remains tight in the global market. The agency says this is just the beginning as Russia's invasion of Ukraine drags on.
Because of the persisting daily production shortage, ay talagang nagkakaroon ng premium yung price per barrel at tuloy-tuloy yan.
Oil companies advised that diesel prices would go up by 80 centavos per liter, while gasoline prices will increase by 90 centavos per liter. Diesel is now being sold between 52 to 60 pesos in gas stations in Metro Manila, while gasoline retails between 57 to over 80 pesos per liter. Jeepney drivers like Romel are left scratching their heads. What's going to happen to their usual take-home income of 400 pesos a day?
Pahirap na yung biyahe. Ay, taas pa po, sana itaas na yung pamasahe. Para kumita naman kami.
To cope with the non-stop oil price surge, transport groups filed a petition at the LTFRB for a 5 peso increase in the minimum fare for jeepneys set to be discussed on Tuesday.
But what is most important now is yung 10 pesos effect nila within the week dahil talagang hirap na ang mga driver.
The LTFRB said they are currently evaluating the petition.
Masusi po natin na yung pinag-aaralan po natin talaga ng mabuti yung magiging consequence nitong mga hiling nito. Binabalanse din po natin sa yung balancing of interest natin sa kapakanan din ng mga commuters at ng domino effect nito sa mga goods.
The LTFRB said it has requested for the Budget Department to fast-track the release of funds for the Pantawid Pasada program, where 377,000 drivers nationwide are expected to benefit from the 2.45 billion peso allocation. For News 5, Gerard De La Peña, we are One News.
What is government's plan to soften the blow of the consecutive oil price hikes with motorists? That big question and more with Senator Gatchalian, chairman of the Senate Energy Panel. Senator Gatchalian, welcome to The Big Story.
Thank you, Robbie. Good evening and good evening to you and Gretchen.
Senator Gatchalian, of course, we're getting squeezed both on the supply and on the demand side as they apply both to domestic as well as external forces. What options do we really have?
Well, Robbie, the issue of stabilizing our oil supply and also the prices of oil supply is a long-term endeavor. We cannot do this overnight because we're very dependent to imported oil. Almost 100% of our oil requirements come from abroad, meaning we're very dependent on international oil supply. So moving forward, we need to lessen our dependence to imported oil by transitioning to e-vehicles as well as looking for domestic sources. But in the short term, what's happening right now is a lot of the oil pundits are speculating, and as well as the uncertainty created by the Russian invasion is creating a lot of unevenness in the market.
Okay, well, you mentioned the long term. You mentioned also short term. I want to dwell a bit more on the short term. Among other things, you said, as a last resort, we may consider suspending excise taxes on oil. Where are we in that consideration at this point?
Right now, Robbie, everything is still speculative in terms of oil supply. Russia is a major oil supplier at 5 million barrels every year. And taking away 5 million barrels is a lot of, will create a lot of disruptions in the market. As we speak, we already have 1 million deficit, 1 million barrels of oil deficit as we speak. And if you remember last November, because a lot of economies are opening and there's a deficit of 1 million barrels, prices of oil went up in the international market. Luckily, and luckily it went down in December, but this invasion created a lot of uncertainty that is pushing the prices up again. So in the short term, what we can implement is a shock absorber program. No? And one of the most effective shock absorber program is the Pantawid Pasada, which is already funded in the 2022 budget. There's about 2.5 billion pesos for Pantawid Pasada, and additional 500 million for fuel subsidy for the agriculture sector. So that's about 3 billion pesos in total.
Okay, Senator Gatchalian, maraming salamat po. That was Senator Win Gatchalian, Chairman of the Senate Energy Panel.
The tension in Eastern Europe continues to make global oil supply tight. Chances of that easing depends on how talks between Russia and Ukraine will unfold. Delegations from Kiev and Moscow are set to meet at the Ukraine-Belarus border. On the drawing board are talks of possible ceasefire and withdrawal of all Russian forces in Ukraine. Both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have agreed to the peace talks, with Moscow dropping its preconditions after suffering military setbacks. But prior to those talks, Russia's nuclear forces have been placed on high alert. Putin cited NATO's aggressive stance and sanctions as a reason for the move. The United States condemns the move, saying it escalates the war, while the UK says Putin won't go as far as using nuclear weapons. Reports of Belarus joining the fight with Russia have also started to circulate, according to a U.S. official. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko is a close ally of Putin. The former Soviet Republic has been used as a launching pad for attacks. These are the other big stories tonight. After nearly 3 years of hard lockdown, Metro Manila and 38 other areas are set to loosen its COVID restrictions to Alert Level 1. Is this the beginning of a new normal? Without an endorsement from Malacanang, supporters of the President and Senator Bong Go pledged to back the Marcos-Duterte unity. And a K-drama Squid Game wins big at the Screen Actors Guild Awards. Find out if your favorite character bagged an award. We find out after the break. Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay.
Starting tomorrow, Metro Manila, along with 38 other areas, will shift to the lowest alert level status as COVID-19 cases continue to decline.
What kind of changes could we expect from this shift? To find out, we have with us News 5 correspondent Maricel Halili. Good evening, Mase.
Good evening, Robbie. Good evening, Gretchen.
Mase, let's start with letting people understand what's allowed and what's not allowed. What exactly comes with Alert Level 1?
Well, first and foremost, Robbie, there won't be any limitations anymore when it comes to the seating capacity in commercial establishments. For example, restaurants can now accommodate 100% of their seating capacity. Gatherings are also allowed, provided that all the customers or all individuals who will attend the gatherings, like religious activities or christening or birthday parties, must be fully vaccinated. So those 18 years old and above must provide or must show proof that they are already fully vaccinated. Even public transportation, they can now operate with full capacity. But of course, the mandatory wearing of face mask will still be implemented. Private and public offices can now have 100% of their workforce to work on site, provided that all their employees are fully vaccinated. Disinfection room or isolation room, foot bath are not required anymore in commercial establishments, as well as checking of temperature before entering the building or establishment. That's not mandatory anymore. It's already optional.
Okay, Mase, did I hear you right? Vaccination is not yet mandatory for everyone, but individuals above 18 years old are required to present proof of vaccination. Tama ba yun?
That's right, Gretchen. Actually, this is not a new protocol. If you recall, Gretchen, even if Metro Manila is still under alert level 2, commercial establishments, some offices are already requiring proof of vaccination. It just so happened that some commercial establishments are not that strict when it comes to checking vaccination cards. But yes, it is a requirement.
In the meantime, to that point, Mase, how do our officials plan to ensure that health protocols will still be followed?
Well, it's more like a self-regulation now, Robbie. Of course, the Philippine National Police, the law enforcement agencies will still make sure that health protocols are still being followed. But since we're in a transition to a new normal, it's more of self-regulatory.
Okay, maraming salamat, Maricel Halili, News 5 correspondent.
As the war in Ukraine rages on, more and more countries are taking sides, but the Philippines, through the Defense Department, is erring on the side of caution by staying neutral. Is this the right move to take? The answers in this report by mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez.
Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana continues to draw flack for saying that the Philippines should remain neutral in the invasion of Ukraine, and that because we're not near them, we don't care about what's going on in Europe. International Studies Professor Renato De Castro called his position absurd.
Country does not exist simply on the basis of interest. Very clear sa Constitution natin that we denounce war as an instrument of national policy.
De Castro said the government can denounce Russia's actions through diplomacy and without having to directly mention the country. On the other hand, International Relations Professor Ana Malindog Uy said the Philippines shouldn't get caught up in the politics between superpowers.
The country, again, should refuse and prevent at all costs the possibility of being a proxy or a pawn of any superpower in their proxy wars.
The war has also raised questions about the implications on Asia, given China's close ties with Russia. The worry is that Beijing can one day invade Taiwan, just as Moscow did with Ukraine.
We have to be prepared for that because China is now getting, support, from Russia. Meron siyang friend to support China on whatever actions China will take in the Taiwan Strait.
Secretary Lorenzana has also issued a new statement, saying the Defense Department views the developments in Ukraine with the utmost concern. Mobile journalist Pamela Vasquez, We Are One News.
For the big story in sports, Gilas Pilipinas took a beating from New Zealand on Sunday. They suffered their first loss in the 2023 FIBA Basketball World Cup Asian qualifiers, 63-88. Gilas shot just 35.8% from the field, including only 5 of 25 from beyond the arc and 13 of 23 from the free throw line. Gilas has now split their first 2 games of the tournament, while the Tall Blacks took sole possession of the group's top spot with a 2-0 record. In a statement, Gilas head coach Shot Reyes said that while the result was disappointing, the national team was able to achieve its goal of competing during this window and prepare for 2023. Meanwhile, with the return of collegiate sports on the horizon, the UAAP has partnered with Smart Communications. Smart has announced that it would bring the UAAP games to legions of fans via the GigaPlay app. With fans and students yet to be allowed inside the venues, the telecommunications giant said it intends to play a crucial role by delivering real-time UAAP action to subscribers and sports fans. After 2 years of inactivity, the UAAP will finally return with Season 84 tipping off this March 26.
In other news, a new singing reality show will soon hit the screens. TV5, Signal, Kumu, and Cornerstone Productions will join forces to produce Top Class, The Rise to P-Pop Stardom. Top Class is set to bring together world-class mentors and facilities to showcase Filipino talent to the world. Catch Top Class, The Rise to P-Pop Stardom soon on TV5 and Signal Play app, YouTube, and tune in for the digital content at Kumu.
Time for another quick break. When we return, Let's Go Uniteam Coalition, Senator Bong Go and President Duterte supporters backed the presidential bid of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and his running mate Sara Duterte Carpio. Meanwhile, despite the ongoing Russian invasion, hundreds of overseas Filipino workers in Ukraine are opting to stay and offer help to fellow kababayans. And a touching acceptance speech of Squid Game star Hoyeon Jung at the Screen Actors Guild Awards. More of these big stories after the break. Good evening, you're still watching The Big Story. I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Robbie Alampay. More than 40 Filipinos have been evacuated from Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, to Lviv, according to the Department of Foreign Affairs.
Meanwhile, some Filipinos who chose to stay are now offering their homes to those needing shelter. More details in my report. What used to be a food storage is now a bomb shelter for 30-year-old Pinay Rhea Ramos. Together with her 7-month-old baby and husband, Ukrainian Oleg Taibov, Rhea finds refuge in her in-laws' underground cellar. They had to flee from their home in Kiev, one of the centers of the ongoing crisis between Russia and Ukraine.
Doon po kami nagtatago in case po na magkaroon man ng explosions or something, at least po we're protected po ba kami doon sa baba po.
Although there's an option to leave Ukraine, Rhea decided to stay, not wanting to be apart from her family.
Pwede lang po umuwi ako po kasi ako is a Filipino citizen po. Kung kasama lang po talaga yung Mr. and baby ko po, aalis po talaga kami, ma'am. Sino po namang gusto po ma-stuck sa ganitong klaseng sitwasyon po?
Rhea now longs for her family back home.
Papa, alam ko po papanood mo to, kaya mag-alala. I have second papa na alam ko po poprotektahin ako. Sa family ko po, lalo na po sa papa ko, sa mga magulang ko po, sa mga kapatid ko na sa mga nag-aalala po sa amin lagi. Okay lang po.
For now, groceries and banks are still open, and they have already stocked up on food good for a month, enough to even accommodate a fellow Pinoy, Rhea's friend Sunshine, who also has a Ukrainian partner. Like Rhea, she also worries for her newborn baby.
Kasi yung anak ko is super baby pa and she's 3 weeks old and wala siyang kamuwang-muwang. Yun lang po yung nagpapalakas sa akin na to move forward, yung husband ko at saka yung anak ko po.
Ano po mensahe niyo sa family niyo na nandito? Siyempre nag-aalala po sila eh.
We're okay. I know you keep praying us here na to keep us safe until this war will end. Yun po yung tatagan din yung loob nyo, mama, papa, na I am keep updating you na kung anong mangyari dito.
The government, for its part, continues to call on Filipinos who want to evacuate to call Philippine Embassy in Warsaw. But for those who need to stay in Ukraine, Rhea and Sunshine are opening their homes for other Pinoys who need shelter.
Filipino, we always will meet you with bread and food.
Gretchen Ho, We Are One News. Now we give you updates on the campaign trail of the presidential candidates. Labor leader Caliori de Guzman pushes for the country to leave the World Trade Organization. During CNN Philippines presidential debate on Sunday, the labor leader blamed the country's dependence on foreign trade for the destruction of the agricultural sector. Senator Ping Lacson visits Quezon, where he talks with local fisherfolk. Lacson promised to prioritize their welfare over foreigners as he reiterates claims that some Filipino fisherfolk who sailed in the West Philippine Sea have not yet returned to their families, while others chose to not sail again in fear of losing their lives. Meanwhile, groups claiming to be supporters of Senator Bong Go are now backing the presidential bid of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and Sara Duterte Carpio. The group previously backed Go's short-lived run for president, but is now saying they have finally accepted and moved on from Go's decision to drop out of the race. The group formed the Let's Go Uniteam Coalition in support of Marcos Jr. and Sara Duterte. 3 labor groups have expressed their support for presidential candidate Isko Moreno. The groups say they favor the Bilis Kilos campaign of the Manila mayor as well as his Build, Build, Build policy. Senator Manny Pacquiao's motorcade drove around Pasig in his latest campaign. Despite not meeting Pasig Mayor Vico Soto, Pacquiao says getting his campaign to the city is more than enough for him. Pacquiao also went to Marikina today. Lastly, Vice President Leni Robredo visited the launch of a Fisher Folk Coalition in Quezon City as the group expressed support for her candidacy. She also spoke to an online information technology and business processing management forum.
History was made at the 28th Annual Screen Actor Guild Awards. The Korean global hit series Squid Game bagged the top 3 honors, becoming the first Korean TV show and first foreign language TV series to win SAGs. Actors Lee Jung-jae and Ho Yeon-jung won the Outstanding Performance by Male and Female Actors in a Drama Series. Squid Game also took home the Outstanding Action Performance as a Stunt Ensemble Award.
I can only think that I am going back to Korea, do what I always did best, work on a lot of great films and drama.
Meanwhile, the film Coda also made history with the Best Cast win. It is the first movie with a predominantly deaf cast to bag the SAG Awards top prize. Actress Marlee Matlin signed her speech and thanked the awarding body.
This validates the fact that we, deaf actors, can work just like anybody else.
Coda actor Troy Kotsur, meanwhile, became the first deaf actor to win the Best Supporting Actor award. The SAG awarding ceremony aired live on Sunday. For News 5, MJ Marfori, we are One News.
The easing of restrictions in several areas in the country is definitely a welcome sign for the tourism sector.
In fact, the Tourism Department has released a compilation of specially selected Filipino music that will welcome listeners back to Philippine destinations. Found on Spotify, the playlist is called Sounds More Fun in the Philippines. The first 10 playlists launched are Manila Night Lights, Boracay Beach Bar, Onshore in La Union, Cordillera Calm, the Pan-Philippine Highway Road Trip, Marilake Bike Trail Mix, Balikbayan Jukebox, Counting Clouds in Camiguin, Wedding Vows in Tagaytay, and Deep Dive in Palawan.
The playlists are attuned for every kind of listener. The songs and artists featured in these playlists are Pinoys as well as international artists and bands with Filipino roots. Through this, the DOT intends to provide the feeling that wherever you are, the fun is never far away.
Na-curious ako dun sa Manila Night Lights. Ano yun, no? Speaking of sound trip, congratulations, by the way, for winning another anvil for your promo podcast.
Maraming salamat. May mga maniningil. Magpapaturon ka na naman.
Oo, yun talaga yung pakay ko.
But speaking of yung sound trips ng DOT, are you ready for the Philippines opening up?
Oh my
for
God.
all of these things? I understand you have some events.
I do have a lot. Actually, ang gagawin ko ngayon muna, bago yung mga events ko na yon, magpapagas na ako. Papa-full tank ako ngayon kasi magmamahal na. And kanina, tinanong natin si Mase, ang sabi niya, wala pang desisyon dun sa coding sa umaga. So we're still waiting for that. Ikaw, ready ka na ba?
Well, parang sabak na. I have to admit, I was at a small party in Makati nung weekend. And my own observation is, una, it feels weird, but it's also so quick to drop your guard. Parang walang nangyari. So, ingat tayo. Let's welcome this, but let's stay careful.
Yes, always keep that in mind that we are still in the middle of a pandemic. But in the meantime, listen to Puma Podcast and the DOT's program on Spotify. That wraps up today's Big Story. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. Mask on.
Wash hands.
And stay safe, Philippines. I'm Robbie Alampay.
And I'm Gretchen Ho. We are One News. Have a good evening.